The year was 1066, and England stood at the edge of a storm. King Edward the Confessor had died without an heir, and the kingdom was now a crown with no head. 3 men believed they had the right to wear it. One was Harold Godwinson, the powerful English noble who had been named successor by Edward on his deathbed. Another was William, Duke of Normandy, who claimed Edward had promised him the throne years earlier. And the third was Harold Hardrada, the fearsome king of Norway, who descended from Viking kings and believed England was his by right of conquest. The throne of England was more than a symbol, it was the key to shaping the fate of Western Europe. And in the chaos that followed Edward's death, that fate would be decided by swords, arrows, and blood. Harold Godwinson was crowned almost immediately after Edward's death. The Witan, England's council of nobles and clergy, had chosen him. He was popular, capable, and a seasoned warrior. But not everyone saw his ascension as legitimate. Across the English Channel, William of Normandy was furious. He believed Harold had sworn an oath on holy relics to support William's claim to the throne. For William, this was not just political treachery, it was spiritual betrayal. And William was not a man to be wronged lightly. As he gathered ships, troops, and papal support, he prepared not just for an invasion, but for divine vengeance. Meanwhile, to the north, Harold Hardrada assembled his Viking fleet. He saw the English crown as the final jewel in his legendary career. With an army of hardened Norse warriors and support from Tostig, Harold Godwinson's own estranged brother, Hardrada sailed toward England with dreams of glory. In September of 1066, he landed in Yorkshire and defeated the English forces at the Battle of Fulford. The path to the north lay open. But Harold Godwinson moved with astonishing speed. Marching his army over 180 miles in just 4 days, he caught the invaders off guard at Stamford Bridge. The battle was brutal. In the end, both Hardrada and Tostig were killed, and the Viking threat to England died with them, but Harold had no time to rest. Even as he celebrated victory in the north, word came that William had landed in the south, on the shores of Pevensey, bringing thousands of Norman knights, infantry, and archers. William's army was professional, disciplined, and backed by the Pope himself. Harold turned his exhausted troops south, once again marching across England. It was a race against time. If William could secure a foothold, he could summon reinforcements and turn his invasion into a permanent conquest. The two armies met near the town of Hastings on the 14th of October. 1066, the battlefield was a ridge of high ground called Senlac Hill, where Harold placed his troops in a strong defensive position. His army formed a shield wall, a human fortress of overlapping shields, behind which stood axe-wielding housecarls and levied farmers. William's forces approached from the south, organized in 3 divisions, Bretons on the left, Normans in the center, and French and Flemish troops on the right. At the heart of the Norman army was William himself, clad in mail, mounted on a powerful horse, and ready to carve his name into history. The battle began at dawn. Norman archers loosed the first volleys, but the arrows bounced harmlessly off the English shields. Infantry followed, storming up the hill, only to be repelled by the sheer power of the shield wall. Time and again, the Normans charged, and time and again they were thrown back. But then something unexpected happened. Part of William's left flank, the Bretons, began to retreat, either from fear or by design. The English ferdmen, eager and undisciplined, broke ranks to chase them. It was a mistake. The Normans turned, surrounded the pursuers, and slaughtered them. Seeing the tactic's effectiveness, William ordered it repeated. Feigned retreats drew out more English soldiers, weakening the shield wall with every charge, but even with those small victories, the battle hung in the balance. William had a close call when rumors spread that he had been killed. To rally his troops, he lifted his helmet and rode before them, revealing his face and shouting that he still lived. The Normans cheered and surged forward again. As the sun climbed higher, the battlefield became a slaughterhouse. Blood soaked the earth. The cries of the wounded echoed through the trees. Bodies piled atop one another. The shield wall, weakened but not broken, still held. Then came the turning point. Late in the day, William ordered his archers to fire high into the air. The arrows rained down over the shield wall. And legend says that one struck Harold Godwinson in the eye. Whether myth or truth, what is certain is that Harold fell, and with him, the morale of his army. Leaderless and disoriented, the English line finally broke. The Normans charged with renewed fury, cutting down the fleeing soldiers. The battle was over, and England's fate was sealed. In the aftermath of the battle, William marched to London, facing only sporadic resistance. The English nobles, unable to unite around another leader, eventually submitted. On Christmas Day, 1066, William was crowned King of England in Westminster Abbey. But even that ceremony was tense. As the crowd shouted in celebration, Norman guards outside mistook it for an uprising and set fire to nearby buildings. Smoke filled the abbey as William took the crown, an omen of the turbulent rule to come. William's coronation marked the beginning of a new era, but ruling England was not as simple as claiming victory on a battlefield. The Norman Conquest was not just a military event, it was a social, cultural, and political transformation that would reshape England permanently. Almost immediately, William faced uprisings across the kingdom. From Exeter in the southwest to the north of England, Anglo-Saxon resistance flared. The people who had fought and bled under Harold Godwinson did not welcome a foreign ruler easily. In response, William unleashed terror. In the winter of 1069, following a rebellion in the north supported by the Danes, William ordered what became known as the Harrying of the North. Villages were burned, crops destroyed, and thousands starved to death. The land was so thoroughly ravaged that parts of northern England took generations to recover. To consolidate his rule, William implemented a revolutionary system of control. He seized vast tracts of land from Anglo-Saxon nobles and redistributed them to his Norman followers. In just a few years, the Old English aristocracy was almost entirely replaced. Castles rose across the landscape, stone symbols of Norman power, designed to intimidate and control. Motte-and-Bailey castles, quick to build and strategically placed, became the backbone of Norman military presence. Among the most famous was the White Tower in London, later part of the Tower of London. These fortresses were not just military structures, they were political statements. William was saying, "This is my land now," but conquest also brought integration. The Normans spoke Old French, while the English spoke Old English. Over time, the two languages merged, giving rise to Middle English, the foundation of the language spoken today. Legal systems, governance, and architecture evolved. The very concept of feudalism, where land was exchanged for loyalty and service, was formalized under Norman rule. Knights became landowners, and the hierarchy of lords, vassals, and peasants became entrenched. The old Anglo-Saxon systems were not completely erased, but they were overshadowed by Norman structures. One of William's most enduring legacies was the Domesday Book, compiled in 1086. This massive survey recorded the ownership, value, and resources of virtually every estate in England. It was a tool for taxation and control, but also a symbol of meticulous Norman administration. Nothing like it had ever been attempted in Western Europe. It allowed William to keep an iron grip on his kingdom, knowing exactly who held what and where. Even today, the Domesday Book remains a priceless historical document, offering a snapshot of England in the wake of conquest, but William's rule was not without constant danger. Across the English Channel, his continental territories in Normandy required his attention. He had to balance two realms, England and Normandy, and defend them both from enemies. He appointed loyal regents to govern in his absence, but distrust between Normans and Anglo-Saxons lingered. Revolts simmered beneath the surface. Even within his own family, conflict brewed. His eldest son, Robert Curthose, grew resentful of his father's dominance, leading to rebellion and estrangement. Power, once seized, proved hard to hold. The ripple effects of the Norman conquest reached far beyond William's lifetime. His successors, particularly Henry I and Henry II, would inherit not just a kingdom, but the challenge of fusing two cultures. The legal reforms introduced under Norman kings laid the groundwork for English common law. The system of royal justice, royal writs, and traveling judges all traced their roots to this era. The English monarchy itself was transformed from a tribal kingship into a centralized feudal powerhouse. Nobles owed allegiance directly to the king, not through intermediary lords, a structure that gave the crown unprecedented authority. Religious institutions also changed. Norman bishops replaced many of their Anglo-Saxon predecessors, and cathedral architecture flourished. Romanesque style, with its rounded arches, massive walls, and decorative carvings, began to dominate the English ecclesiastical landscape. The church became both a tool of control and a symbol of divine legitimacy. William was deeply religious, but he also understood the political power of the church. He insisted on royal approval of bishops and limited papal interference, asserting that the king, not Rome, was the true master of England, and yet, for all his power, William the Conqueror remained a man of contradictions. He was ruthless in war, but pious in belief. He could burn entire villages, yet commission monasteries and protect church lands. His body, after his death in 1087, was treated with shocking indignity. During his burial in Caen, France, a fire broke out, and his corpse had to be crammed into a stone tomb too small for his frame. The bloated body burst, filling the church with a foul stench, a grotesque end to a ruler who had reshaped a kingdom, but the story does not end with William. His conquest set in motion centuries of transformation. English identity itself changed. The nobility became Norman, the legal codes evolved, and the language shifted. Over time, the descendants of Normans and Anglo-Saxons would stop seeing themselves as different peoples. They would become English. Yet the scars of conquest remained, visible in place names, legal traditions. And even in the DNA of the population, the Battle of Hastings also altered the balance of power in Europe. With control of both England and Normandy, the English crown became a formidable force on the continent. Future kings, like Richard the Lionheart and Henry V, would wage wars in France, tracing their claims through the bloodline of William. The seeds of the Hundred Years' War were sown in 1066, when William claimed the crown across the sea. The English Channel, once a barrier, became a bridge to empire. In the centuries that followed, the story of 1066 would be told and retold. The Bayeux Tapestry, a 230-foot-long embroidered narrative, immortalized the events leading up to Hastings. It depicted comets, oaths, betrayals, and battle, both propaganda and history woven into cloth. Historians would debate whether Harold truly swore allegiance to William, whether the arrow in his eye was fact or fiction, and whether the conquest was liberation or subjugation. But one fact remains undisputed: 1066 was a turning point. The Battle of Hastings was more than a clash of armies. It was the collision of worlds, Anglo-Saxon and Norman, pagan past and Christian future, isolation and continental ambition. It was the death of one England and the birth of another. The echoes of that single day in October still resonate nearly 1,000 years later. Roads were redrawn, bloodlines rewritten, and power reshaped. From that hill near Hastings, history flowed outward like ripples in a dark pool. It is a reminder that history is not written only in ink, but in fire and steel. That a single battle can decide the fate of a nation. And that behind every crown, there is a story soaked in struggle, ambition, and the unrelenting desire to be remembered. William the Conqueror was not born into greatness. He forged it, blade by blade, oath by oath, until England itself bore his mark. And that mark, whether carved into stone or whispered in legend, has never truly faded.